This is an overview of Vintage Folk Rock Kit, the first in a series of drum instruments for Kontakt by Drumdrops. Developed by Divergent Audio Group, Vintage Folk Rock Kit features a wealth of features for anyone looking for the authentic sound of live drums inside a virtual instrument. Whether you're a producer, songwriter, artist, beat maker, or drummer playing a digital drum kit, the new Vintage Folk Rock Kit for Kontakt by Drumdrops has something to offer. So let's go ahead and take a look at the instrument in detail. Drums can be triggered in one of two ways, either by clicking the on-screen drums or by sending the corresponding MIDI note. When playing by MIDI input, drums are automatically selected. We can enable and disable this behavior by clicking the MIDI icon in the bottom left. When this option is deselected, we can still manually select each of the drums by clicking their on-screen image. Visually, this is represented as an orange halo around the perimeter of the drum. Naturally, the next thing we want to hear will be a pattern played through the drum kit. Vintage Folk Rock Kit comes with a collection of MIDI patterns that are easily accessible by clicking the play button in the center top area of the instrument. This area is also accessible at any point by clicking the Grooves button. In this section, we can see a group of folders that are organized by genre, time signature, tempo, and groove. Inside these folders are a collection of MIDI patterns which can be played back from inside Vintage Folk Rock Kit. Patterns can be selected either by double-clicking from the list or clicking the corresponding previous and next loop arrow. At the bottom of the Groove browser, you can see the options for playback speed. Playback speed can be set to half time, standard time, and double time. MIDI patterns can also be dragged from Vintage Folk Rock Kit into your host or DAW. By clicking and dragging the name of a loop at the right of the play button, you can export a MIDI file directly to your DAW. On playback, gray circles appear over the drums which are being triggered either by MIDI input or MIDI patterns. Any of the drums which are played with a stick also have the option to switch between sticks, hot rods, and brushes. While in the drum kit page, we can also browse through our patterns which are still selected in the Groove page. To the right of the stick selection is an icon, which when selected will make the stick selection apply to all of the drums. This is the kit playback all with sticks. And now all with hot rods, and all with brushes. Vintage Folk Rock Kit includes 11 individual drum pieces: kick drum, snare drum, tom 1, 2, and 3, hi-hats, crash 1, crash 2, ride cymbal, tambourine, and shaker. For each of the selected drums, we have a series of controls which affect the playback of the specified drum. The power switch on drum voice disables the drum and purges its samples from memory. Below that, we have controls for attack, hold, decay, and tune. These settings can also be copied across all drums by holding the Option key and selecting any of the controls. This allows us to take the settings from one drum and copy and paste it very quickly across all other drums. This allows you to quickly dial in a tight room sound or make wide sweeping changes to the tune. Now that we've made these changes globally, let's play back a MIDI file and listen. We can hear that the ride cymbal sounds choked. In this case, let's go ahead and select that drum and increase the hold and decay. Resetting each of the controls is as simple as holding Option and Control or Command and clicking each of the controls. Globally adjusting the tune with the Option key is an especially powerful effect. and the human for each of the drums. The first control is volume, which has a range of plus and minus 12 dB. The current value for the last selected control is always visible in the upper right-hand corner. The next control is velocity, which has a range of plus and minus 127 velocity steps. The third humanized control is tune, which has a range of plus and minus 100 cents, or 1 semitone. This is especially apparent on drums with high frequency content, such as snares and cymbals. The last humanized control is timing, which delays the incoming MIDI input by up to 50 milliseconds. The last section to talk about on this page are the velocity curves. First, let's start MIDI playback so we have something to listen to. The first option is low gain, or a low exponential curve. The second option is linear. And the third option is high gain, or a high exponential curve. By clicking the All button, we can apply the current velocity setting to all drums. The fourth option is the custom curve. This allows you to draw in your own custom velocity curve for the selected drum. On each of the pages in Vintage Folk Rock Kit, we can also use the Save and Load button, or Save and Recall buttons, to save the settings specific to that page to an external file which can be loaded later. Let's go ahead now and reset these controls and move on to our next page. The Mixer page can be accessed through the button on the bottom left-hand corner below MIDI Select. This page allows us to view all of the channels associated with each drum and their specific effects. The Mixer page has two sections with a maximum of 16 channels. The sections can be changed by clicking the arrow to the right of the pan buttons. The same thing can also be achieved by holding the Option key and clicking the Mixer button. Each of the channels has control over pan, mute solo, external output, volume, and insert effects. When a channel is soloed, its corresponding solo button will blink. Multiple channels can be soloed at once, and an easy way for unsoloing all tracks is to hold Option and click one of the currently soloed solo buttons. Individually soloing a single track can be enabled by holding Option and clicking a solo button for a track that is currently not solo enabled. Above the solo button is the control for pan, below that is a control for volume on the fader, above the pan knob are the controls for the insert effects. Currently, we can see the EQ insert. Inserts are made available by clicking the Inserts button at the top of the instrument. The EQ can be enabled by the power button in the top right-hand corner, or alternatively, it's automatically enabled by selecting any of its controls. The EQ is a 4-band EQ with low, low-mid, high-mid, and highs with buttons for shelves, bells, and cue controls. On the left-hand side are the routing options. These allow you to change the routing order of the insert effects. The second insert effect section are the dynamics, which includes the compressor and the transient shaper. The compressor features controls for threshold, ratio, attack, release, makeup, and mix. The transient shaper features controls for both transient attack and transient sustain. The third insert effect is the tape machine. The tape machine is a global effect with controls above each channel for individual input and output gain. Input gain is used for increasing the saturation on the drum, while output gain is used for making up the difference between the processed and unprocessed sound. At the bottom of the tape machine are three powerful global controls: bias, tone, and output gain. Let's enable the tape machine now and check out how it works. I'm going to start by boosting the input gain on the kick drum. The channel controls make changes to the individual channel. Input is used for increasing or decreasing saturation, and output is used for makeup gain. The bias control found below is a global control which increases the saturation on all drum channels at once. Once the right level of saturation has been found, the input gain can be used to fine-tune the perfect level of saturation. A being between the two, we can hear that we've lost a little bit of level with all the saturation, so let's increase the output gain. Even though the tape-saturated version of the sound is much louder, we can see in the meters that the peak level is still the same. Now that we're a bit closer, let's continue to fine-tune the global controls. We can hear that the tone control makes a drastic change to the overall tonal balance of the drums. The next section in the mixer to look at is the mic mixer. This is an area in the instrument where we can blend and adjust between all of the available drum mics for each channel. In vintage folk rock kit, each drum channel has 5 mics: the kick mic, the snare mic, the overhead mic, and room 1 and room 2. Let's start by turning off all of these mics. We can do the same to all the other channels by holding Option and clicking a mic control to match all of the drum mics to the same level. This allows us to quickly set up a new mix without having to go through and zero each knob individually. Let's begin a new mix now by starting with the overhead mic. Next, we'll bring the kick in just on the kick channel. Then, we'll put the snare mic on the snare channel. We'll finish it off by adding room 2 to all the channels, and then just putting room 1 on the snare mic. Just like with the mixer button, holding Option and clicking the mic mix button will switch between section 1 and section 2. We can also hide the inserts and show another set of controls in its place. The first one we're going to look at are the sends. There are 4 send controls per channel, 2 delays and 2 reverbs. Let's go ahead and set up a delay on the kick and a delay on the snare drum, each with their own time values. We'll go into the return section and enable each of the return effects which the sends are sending to. Next, let's go ahead and solo up just the kick channel and just the snare channel to hear this a little better. Let's turn these off now and take a look at the reverb effects. Going back to our sends, let's start out by holding the Option key and sending all of our drum channels to reverb number 1. We'll do this to recreate an artificial room sound. Vintage folk rock kit comes with a great collection of custom impulse response reverbs. Over 150 different presets are included. Each of the reverbs has powerful control over the tone, with specific high-pass and low-pass filters for both the early and late reflections. All 4 return effects also have their own output, useful for fine-tuning the exact level of an effect. Let's go ahead and disable these now and take a look at the last section of the mixer, the master section. The master section features a collection of effects specifically tailored for bus processing: crush, compression, EQ, stereo width, and limiting. We can also go ahead and change the routing order, which will reflect in the graphics, either putting the compression before the EQ or the EQ before the compression. The crush effect is a combination of multiple inserts specifically designed for dirtying up your drum sound, whether used just to add a bit of grit or as a special effect. There's a lot of power inside the crush effect. Shatter is a special level-dependent bit crushing effect. Redux is a sample rate reduction, and noise, like shatter, is also level-dependent noise. To highlight this, let's go back to the drum kit page and shorten all of the drum samples. We'll hear that the shatter and noise effects are influenced by the length and volume of the samples. The next section in Crush is a master transient shaper with the attack labeled Peak, which is useful for boosting transients, and another knob labeled Smash, which is useful for complete and total obliteration. In yellow, we have the filter Cutoff. This control is useful for taking off some of the edge or harshness that the other effects impart. The resonance and gain control can be useful for creating filter sweeps and resonant peaks. All of the master effects also have their own output control for easy and convenient level matching. The next effect to look at is a bus compressor. We have the threshold, ratio, attack, release, makeup gain, and mix. After that, the next effect is the EQ. The EQ features a high frequency, a high mid frequency, a low mid frequency, and a low frequency, all with boost, cut, and frequency selection. After the EQ is the stereo width control, which can be heard on stereo sources and when channels are panned left and right. The last effect is the limiter, which is useful for boosting signals and for heavy compression. In the bottom right-hand corner is the Save and Recall buttons. These are used for loading and saving mixer settings as a unique file which can be recalled later. The last page to look at now is the mapping page. The mapping page is one of the most powerful features of this new drum engine. This page allows you to assign each articulation to one or more MIDI notes. Vintage Folk Rock Kit features over 53 unique articulations, and we can audition each articulation simply by clicking on its name. Articulations are highlighted in unique colors. Red is for kick drum, yellow or snare drums, hi-hats are in cyan, percussion and toms are in orange, and cymbals are in green. These all correspond to the default color keys for Complete Control, and for users of Complete Control, your keys will highlight in the correct colors. In the upper right-hand corner of some articulations, you'll see an arrow. This arrow, when present, lets you know that this articulation is currently mapped to the keyboard. When we click the articulation, an arrow appears above the key where the articulation is currently mapped. Clicking that key removes the articulation, and also removes the arrow. When an articulation is selected, clicking any key on the keyboard will add that articulation to the selected key. We can also at any point press the Clear button and remove all mappings for the current articulation. Pressing the Learn button will allow incoming MIDI to map the currently selected articulation to the incoming MIDI note. And now we can see that Kick Hard Beater is once again mapped back to C1. So the mapping page allows you to very quickly make your own custom layout for how you would like Vintage Folk Rock Kit to be mapped across your MIDI controller. Once you have a layout that you like, you can copy it to one of the 5 custom slots. You can also use one of the provided factory layouts as a starting point. To copy your current mapping to one of the custom slots, press the Copy button. Then you can choose one of the 5 slots. After picking a slot, your mappings will now be saved to that custom slot. Anytime you recall that custom slot, your custom mappings will be recalled as well. Down below, in this page, the Save and Recall buttons are used to export your mappings as an external file. This can be useful for both archiving and sharing your custom mappings. On the lower left of this page is a slider for Playback Velocity. Playback Velocity determines the velocity that an articulation is triggered when it's clicked. This can be useful for hearing the articulation at various intensities. It can also be set to 0 if you would prefer to hear no sound when an articulation is clicked. The Playback Velocity also applies to the drum kit page. For users of vDrum kits and advanced MIDI controllers, we also have the option to edit CC messages, which can be used to control specific articulations. We can enter this page by clicking the button which says Edit CC. For the hi-hat CC articulation, there is the ability to control which articulation is played at any time by the CC message that is received. We can click the red button to the left of the word hi-hat CC position to enable MIDI Learn. When this is enabled, the next received controller message will control this value. By default, hi-hat link is on, but we can disable that in order to enable separate hi-hat CC control for both the center and the edge articulations. We can also create a custom curve for the hi-hat CC data. We can set this to be exponential low, linear, exponential high, or create our own custom CC curve. Below this section, we have the note triggers which act as the choke for the cymbal articulations. Again, clicking the red circles enables MIDI Learn. Once a MIDI note has been learned, we can then use that note in order to choke the cymbals. The last control is used for changing the snare articulation based on the CC position. This is especially useful for users of V-drum kits where this is supported on the snare drum. The custom CC data can also be stored in the custom presets along with the note information. Thank you for taking the time to watch this overview of Vintage Folk Rock Kit. For more information, please visit drumdrops.com.